The training hall stretched before me like a cathedral of chrome and glass, its polished floors reflecting the dual suns of Kepler 442b through the transparent ceiling. I stood at the instructor's podium, my forearms crossed in what I hoped conveyed the appropriate mixture of authority and skepticism. Behind me, holographic displays flickered to life, showing combat scenarios that had broken the spirits of countless cadets over my 30-year career. "Welcome to Advanced Tactical Combat," I announced, my voice echoing through the massive space. "I am Senior Instructor Vorn Kellix of the Galactic Defense Initiative. Most of you will fail this course. Some of you will question your life choices. And one of you—" I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the assembled recruits, "will make me regret accepting this assignment." My eyes landed on her. Of course they did. She was the only human in a class of 43 students. Mira Kaine sat in the third row, looking impossibly small between a Thorganian mountain of muscle and a Velcrin whose exoskeleton clicked nervously. She had this expression on her face, this little half-smile that I'd learned to recognize over the years. It was the same expression every human wore when they thought they knew something you didn't. I hated that smile. "Let me be absolutely clear about one thing," I continued, directing my words at the human. "There will be no creative reinterpretations of the rules, no unconventional strategies, no lateral thinking exercises, and, absolutely, positively, no human hacks allowed." The smile widened. Just slightly, but enough to make my secondary stomach churn. "Is something amusing, Cadet Kaine?" "No, sir." Her voice was steady, polite even. "Just looking forward to the challenge." "Wonderful." I tapped my data pad, pulling up the first exercise. "Then you won't mind demonstrating for the class. Please step into the combat sphere." The other students shifted in their seats. Even the Thorganian looked uncomfortable. The combat sphere was notorious. 360 degrees of simulated warfare, adaptive AI opponents, and a failure rate that hovered around 90% for first-time users. Mira stood, rolling her shoulders in a way that suggested she'd done this before. She probably had. Humans always practiced. They practiced everything, obsessively, compulsively, as if repetition alone could overcome the fundamental limitations of their biology. She stepped into the sphere, and the transparent walls sealed behind her with a soft hiss. I adjusted the difficulty settings. Standard protocol for day 1. 3 opponents, medium aggression, conventional weapons only. Begin. The simulation materialized around her. 3 Krelnor warriors, each standing over 7 feet tall, armed with plasma rifles and tactical shields. They moved in formation, professional, coordinated, the kind of opponents that required years of training to defeat. Mira dropped to one knee. For a moment, I thought she'd frozen. First-day panic was common enough. Then I saw what she was doing. She'd pulled something from her belt. A small metal cylinder, maybe 6 inches long. "What is that?" I zoomed in on my display. She pressed a button, and the cylinder unfolded. Segments extended, locked into place with mechanical precision, transforming into a staff nearly 6 feet in length. The entire transformation took less than 2 seconds. "Cadet Kaine, that weapon is not standard issue." "You said conventional weapons only, sir." She spun the staff experimentally. "This is extremely conventional. Been around for thousands of years on Earth." One of the simulated Krelnor fired. Mira was already moving, the staff becoming a blur of motion that deflected the plasma bolt into the floor. She closed the distance before the warrior could recalibrate, struck twice at the knee joints, once at the throat. The simulation flickered and died. Collapsible staff, I muttered, making notes. Clever, but hardly revolutionary. The second Krelnor charged, while the third provided covering fire. Mira did something I'd never seen before. She ran straight at the charging opponent, planted the staff, and vaulted over him like some kind of circus performer. While airborne, she kicked backward, catching the warrior in the head with both feet. He went down hard. The third Krelnor, now alone, switched to full automatic. Smart. Overwhelmed the target with sustained fire. Mira threw the staff. It spun end over end, a perfect spiral that caught the warrior square in the chest plate. The impact triggered the simulation's damage protocols. The Krelnor staggered. In that moment of disruption, Mira sprinted forward, retrieved her weapon mid-stride, and delivered a sweeping strike to the back of the knees. 3 opponents. 97 seconds. The combat sphere powered down. Mira stood in the center, breathing hard but not gasping. The staff collapsed back into its compact form with a series of metallic clicks. Acceptable, I said, because I refused to give her the satisfaction of anything more. Return to your seat. She did, that infuriating smile still in place. The rest of the morning proceeded according to schedule. I ran the class through basic formations, response protocols, and threat assessment scenarios. Standard first-day material. Most of the students struggled. The human took notes, asked no questions, and looked perpetually amused by something only she could see. During the lunch break, I retreated to my office, a modest space overlooking the training complex. My assistant, a young Falarian named Kix, brought me a nutrition pack and a data pad filled with personnel files. "You're reviewing the human's record again," Kix observed. His species was telepathic, which made privacy impossible but honesty mandatory. "I'm checking for violations. Surely bringing an unauthorized weapon qualifies." The collapsible staff is registered in her equipment manifest. Filed 2 weeks. Ego. Approved by the quartermaster. I crushed the empty nutrition pack with more force than necessary. Of course it is. Instructor Kellix, if I may. Kix settled into the chair across from my desk. "Why does this human bother you so much? She performed admirably." "That's exactly the problem." I pulled up footage from the morning session, replaying the combat sphere sequence. "Look at this. She's been here for 4 hours, and she's already adapting. In 3 months, she'll be outperforming students who've trained their entire lives. Is that not the goal of instruction? Not like this?" I paused the footage on a frame showing Mira mid-vault. "Humans don't play fair, Kix. They find angles nobody else considers. They break systems that are supposed to be unbreakable. They turn limitations into advantages. Do you know what they call it? Thinking outside the box? As if the universe didn't put those boxes there for very good reasons." Kix's antennae twitched with amusement. "You're afraid she'll make you look foolish." "I'm afraid she'll get people killed when she pulls one of these stunts in actual combat, and it doesn't work." "Then teach her why it won't work." I turned off the display. "That's what I'm trying to do." The afternoon session focused on hostile environment survival. I'd prepared a scenario that had reduced countless cadets to whimpering wrecks. The simulation dumped them in the middle of a Category 5 radiation storm on Gamma Serpentis Thwarfer, with failing equipment and no clear extraction point. Most species approached it logically. They'd assess resources, establish shelter, send distress signals, and wait for rescue. It was the sensible, by-the-book response. Humans, I'd learned, were allergic to sensible. Mira materialized in the simulation surrounded by purple lightning and howling wind that would have stripped flesh from bone in real conditions. Her environmental suit immediately began flashing warnings. Radiation levels critical. Life support at 40%. Navigation systems offline. She didn't panic. Didn't even seem particularly concerned. She just started walking. "Cadet Kaine, what are you doing?" "Moving, sir." Her voice crackled through the communication link. "Staying in one place means dying slowly. Moving means maybe dying fast, but also maybe finding a way out. Your suit has limited power. Every step drains resources. Then I'd better make them count." She climbed a ridge, using handholds in the simulated rock face that I hadn't even known existed in the program's parameters. At the top, she paused, scanning the horizon. Then she removed her helmet. "Cadet, what are you doing?" "Radiation is coming from that direction." She pointed to the east, where purple clouds churned. "Which means that direction has less radiation. Basic physics, sir. Follow the gradient. You just exposed yourself to a lethal dose. For 30 seconds, my suit has radiation scrubbers. I'm betting they can handle a short exposure if it means finding the safe zone faster." She replaced the helmet, adjusted her course, and continued walking. 15 minutes later, she reached the extraction point. Her suit was at 11% power. Radiation exposure was borderline critical but survivable. Mission complete. I stared at the results, trying to find a flaw in her logic. There wasn't one. It was reckless, dangerous, and completely contrary to standard operating procedure. It had also worked perfectly. Unorthodox approach, Cadet Kaine. But effective, sir. That smile again. I was starting to fantasize about assigning her permanent latrine duty. The next 3 weeks followed a similar pattern. Every exercise I designed to challenge conventional thinking, she dismantled with solutions that made perfect sense in hindsight, but never occurred to anyone else in the moment. She turned squad combat drills into lessons on resource optimization. She solved hostage scenarios by negotiating with the AI hostage takers, something nobody had even considered trying. She failed a zero-gravity navigation test and then asked to try again with a ball of string and a modified grappling hook. It worked. Of course it worked. My fellow instructors started avoiding me in the mess hall. Word had spread that I'd been assigned the human, and nobody wanted to hear about it. They all had their own stories. Humans who'd rewired their ships using spare parts and somehow increased efficiency by 20%. Humans who'd beaten tactical simulations by surrendering and then escaping from the prisoner of war scenario. Humans who looked at a problem, said that's impossible, and then did it anyway. "You're obsessing," Kix told me one evening as I reviewed training footage for the 4th time. "I'm being thorough. You're afraid of being wrong about her." I closed the datapad. What if I am wrong? What if humans really are better at this? What does that say about the rest of us? We've been training warriors for thousands of years across hundreds of worlds, and then this one species shows up and makes us all look like we've been doing it wrong the entire time. Or, Kix suggested gently, they simply do it differently. Not better. Not worse. Different. Different can get people killed in combat. So can being predictable. The midterm evaluation arrived faster than I wanted. It was the halfway point of the course, the moment when we separated those who would continue from those who should pursue other career paths. The evaluation consisted of a final exercise, a complex scenario that required every skill we'd taught, combined with improvisation and tactical thinking. I'd designed this year's scenario personally. A rescue mission on a hostile station with multiple variables, limited resources, and no single correct solution. Most cadets would struggle for hours before either succeeding through careful planning or failing due to unforeseen complications. I explained the parameters to the assembled class. You have 6 hours. Your objectives are clearly defined. Any questions? Mira raised her hand. Of course she did. Yes, Cadet Kaine? Are we allowed to work in teams, sir? This is an individual evaluation. Understood. But the scenario involves hostages. Real hostages would potentially help in their own rescue if given the opportunity. I saw where this was going. The hostages are civilians, non-combatants. Right, but they'd have knowledge of the station layout, guard rotations, weak points in security. Pretending they're useless seems like an artificial limitation. Several other students perked up at this. I could see the gears turning in their heads. The scenario stands as written, I said firmly. You have 6 hours. Begin. They dispersed to their individual simulation pods. I settled into the observation center, where I could monitor all 43 feeds simultaneously. Most students started exactly as I'd predicted. They approached cautiously, gathered intelligence, began formulating plans. Mira walked straight through the front door. What are you doing? I switched to her direct feed. Surrendering, sir. Excuse me? I'm one person attempting to infiltrate a station with 60 armed guards. My chances of success through stealth or combat are basically 0. But if I surrender, they'll take me to the holding area with the other hostages. Then I'm inside their security perimeter with no alarms raised. They'll confiscate your equipment. Will they confiscate my brain? She smiled at the camera. That's really all I need. The simulated guards did exactly what she'd predicted. They disarmed her, scanned her for hidden weapons, and dragged her to the holding cell where 17 virtual hostages huddled in fear. The cell door slammed shut with an electronic lock that would take a master hacker hours to bypass. Mira looked around, then addressed the hostages. Hi, I'm here to rescue you. I'm going to need everyone's help. Who knows the maintenance schedules for this section? An elderly Tarlaxian raised a tentative appendage. Perfect. What about guard rotation patterns? 2 more hostages responded. Over the next hour, I watched in growing disbelief as Mira organized the hostages into a coordinated resistance movement. She had them create a distraction by staging a medical emergency. When guards entered the cell, the hostages overwhelmed them through sheer numbers, following Mira's precise instructions. They acquired weapons, keycards, and, most importantly, information. She didn't fight her way through the station. She turned the station itself into her weapon. Hostages who'd lived there for weeks knew which corridors had cameras, which shifts had lazy guards, where emergency equipment was stored. Mira synthesized this information into a plan that was equal parts brilliant and completely insane. They shut down life support to one section, forcing a third of the guards to respond. They triggered a false containment breach in the POID reactor, pulling away another third. The remaining guards found themselves facing a coordinated assault from unexpected directions by people who weren't supposed to be a threat. 3 hours and 42 minutes after beginning, Mira led 17 hostages to the extraction point. 0 casualties, minimal resource expenditure, complete success. The simulation pod opened. She stepped out, stretching muscles cramped from hours in the confined space. How did I do, sir? I had no words. None. Every criticism I'd prepared evaporated like morning dew under a neutron star. That was not the intended solution, I finally managed. You said there was no single correct solution. You meant we should follow the tactical frameworks you taught us. Use proper infiltration techniques, minimize variables, maintain control. She tilted her head slightly. But, sir, you also taught us to adapt to circumstances. The circumstance here was being vastly outnumbered and outgunned. So I adapted. By surrendering. by accepting a temporary disadvantage to gain a strategic position. It's called calculated risk. Other students were emerging from their pods now, most looking exhausted and frustrated. A few had succeeded through more conventional approaches. None had done it as quickly or efficiently as Mira. "Cadet Kaine, report to my office after you've cleaned up. We need to discuss your performance." "Yes, sir." That smile appeared again, but this time there was something different about it. Something that looked almost like respect. Looking forward to it. I sat in my office for 20 minutes before she arrived, trying to organize thoughts that felt like they'd been scattered across 3 star systems. The data pad in front of me displayed her evaluation scores. Perfect marks in tactical assessment, resource management, and mission completion. Lower marks in protocol adherence and conventional methodology. The kind of mixed results that made administrative decisions complicated. A knock at the door interrupted my brooding. "Enter." Mira stepped inside, still in her training uniform but cleaned up from the simulation. She stood at attention, hands behind her back, expression neutral. Professional. "Sit down, Cadet Kaine." She took the chair across from my desk, the same one Kix usually occupied. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the distant sounds of the training complex through the walls, equipment being moved, instructors shouting commands, the normal rhythm of military education. "You think I'm going to wash you out," she said finally. "Should I?" "That's your decision, sir, but I'd like to know what I did wrong first." I tapped the data pad. "You violated protocol 17 times during that exercise. You ignored established tactical doctrine. You put hostages in danger by arming them and using them as combatants. By any conventional measure, your approach was reckless and inappropriate. But it worked. This time, what about next time? What happens when you try something creative and it gets someone killed?" She leaned forward slightly. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Granted. You've been waiting for me to fail since day 1. Every exercise, every scenario. You've been watching for the moment when my methods would backfire. When being human would finally prove to be the liability you believe it is." Her voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. "But here's the thing, Instructor Kellix. I'm not trying to prove humans are better than anyone else. I'm just trying to survive using the tools I have. The tools you have include disregarding rules that exist for good reasons." "No, sir. The tools I have include questioning rules that might not apply to every situation." She gestured to the window overlooking the training grounds. "You have students down there from 40 different species. Each one has natural advantages. The Thorganians have incredible strength. The Velkrin have reflexes twice as fast as mine. The Falarians can literally read minds. What do I have? You tell me. Flexibility. Not physical flexibility, though that helps. Mental flexibility. The ability to look at a problem and ask what if instead of accepting that's how it's done. You call it thinking outside the box. We call it adaptation. It's how humans survived on a planet that tried very hard to kill us for millions of years." I studied her face, looking for arrogance or defiance. Found neither, just conviction. "You know what scares me most about humans?" I set down the data pad. "It's not that you break rules. It's that you break them so effectively that everyone else starts questioning whether the rules made sense in the first place. You're infectious, disruptive. Within a generation, you'll have every species in the galaxy second-guessing methods that have worked for centuries. And you think that's bad? I think it's dangerous. Change for the sake of change leads to chaos. Change for the sake of survival leads to evolution." She stood up. "Sir, If you want to fail me, I'll accept that decision. But don't do it because you're afraid of what I represent. Do it because I actually failed to meet the objectives. Otherwise, you're just proving that the system is too rigid to adapt, which kind of makes my point for me. The audacity of it struck me silent. She'd just told a senior instructor, to his face, that the entire training program might be flawed. And the worst part was the nagging suspicion that she might be right. "Sit down, Cadet Kaine. I'm not finished with you yet." She sat. I pulled up a classified file I'd been reviewing earlier. 3 years ago, we had another human in this program. His name was Marcus Flynn. Brilliant tactician, creative problem solver. Reminded me a lot of you, actually. What happened to him? He graduated top of his class, got assigned to a rapid response unit handling hostage situations on the Outer Rim. 6 months into his deployment, he attempted an unconventional rescue operation. Decided the standard approach was too slow, too predictable. He improvised. Mira's expression shifted slightly. She knew where this was going. 12 hostages died. 4 team members. Flynn survived but spent 3 months in medical recovering from injuries. The inquiry concluded that adherence to standard protocol would have resulted in 0 casualties. "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't resurrect the dead." I closed the file. Flynn was talented, innovative, and absolutely convinced that his way was better. He was wrong. Sometimes the rules exist because countless people died learning why those rules matter. What happened to him after he recovered? He requested transfer to Training Command. Said he wanted to teach others from his mistakes. I approved it. He's currently an instructor at the Academy, on Proxima Station. Mira absorbed this information quietly. Did he stop being creative? Stop looking for new solutions? No. But he learned to balance innovation with wisdom, to recognize when creativity helps and when it kills. I met her eyes directly. That's what I need to see from you, Cadet Kaine. Not blind adherence to protocol, not reckless disregard for it either. Judgment. The ability to know which battles require new thinking and which ones require proven methods. How do I develop that judgment, sir? By listening to people who've made the mistakes you haven't yet. By understanding that you're not the first person to think they've found a better way. And by accepting that sometimes the boring, conventional solution is boring and conventional because it's the one that actually works. She nodded slowly. I can do that. Can you? Because right now, you're riding high on a successful evaluation. But I've seen that confidence before. It usually comes right before someone makes a catastrophic error. Then test me harder. Give me scenarios where the creative approach fails. Show me the limitations instead of just telling me they exist. I felt something shift in the conversation. This wasn't defiance. It was a genuine request for education. Maybe even humility, though humans expressed it differently than most species. All right, I'll make you a deal. I pulled up the training schedule. The final examination is in 6 weeks. Between now and then, I'm going to design scenarios specifically for you. Situations where innovation is the trap, not the solution. Places where standard protocol is the only thing keeping people alive. You pass those tests while demonstrating sound tactical judgment, and I'll recommend you for advanced placement. And if I fail? You repeat the entire course with next year's class. Fair? She extended her hand across the desk. A human gesture. I'd learned it meant agreement, commitment. I shook it with my primary right hand. Her grip was firm. Fair. When do we start? Tomorrow morning. Oh, 600 hours. Bring your collapsible staff. You're going to need it. The next 6 weeks were brutal. I constructed scenarios with the help of 3 other senior instructors, each one designed to punish creativity and reward discipline. Rescue operations where deviating from the plan triggered cascading failures. Combat simulations where improvisation led to friendly fire. Hostage situations where negotiating got people killed. Mira failed. A lot. The first week, she failed 7 out of 10 exercises. The second week, 5 out of 10. But something interesting happened. She started asking questions after each failure. Not defensive questions, analytical ones. What did I miss? Where was my thinking flawed? What should I have recognized? She took notes, consulted with other cadets, stayed late in the training hall practicing scenarios over and over until she understood not just what went wrong, but why it went wrong. By week 4, her failure rate dropped to 2 out of 10. By week 5, she was passing 8 out of 10. The scenarios that tripped her up were no longer about creativity versus protocol. They were genuinely complex situations that challenged everyone. The other students noticed. They started following her lead in some exercises, asking themselves what Mira would do before attempting solutions. But they also started recognizing when she held back, when she deliberately chose the conventional approach because the situation demanded it. She was learning judgment. On the morning of the final examination, I arrived at the training hall early. The sun hadn't yet risen over the horizon, leaving the facility bathed in the purple twilight, peculiar to Kepler 442b. I found Mira already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the combat sphere, eyes closed. "Couldn't sleep, cadet?" Her eyes opened. "Just thinking, sir. Going over everything we've covered." "Nervous?" "Terrified, actually." She stood, brushing off her uniform. "This test determines whether I continue or start over. That's a lot of pressure." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Overconfidence gets you killed." Lesson number 47. I remember. The other students began arriving. 43 had started the course. 38 remained. Standard attrition rate. They assembled in the observation area where they'd watch each other's final evaluations and learn from the attempts. "The final examination is different from your midterm," I announced once everyone had gathered. "This scenario has no single objective, no clear endpoint. It's a simulation of actual combat conditions, where objectives change, intel proves incorrect, and allies become casualties. You'll face impossible choices with incomplete information. Some of you will make decisions that haunt you. That's warfare. That's reality." I pulled up the scenario parameters on the main display. You're part of a peacekeeping force on a colony world experiencing civil unrest. Reports indicate terrorist cells preparing to strike civilian targets. Your mission is to prevent casualties while respecting local sovereignty and minimizing force. You have a squad of 5 soldiers under your command. Time limit is 4 hours. Any questions? No one spoke. "Cadet Brell, you're first." The Thorganian stepped into the simulation pod. Over the next 3 hours, I watched 37 students tackle the scenario. Most managed acceptable results. A few achieved excellent outcomes. None found the optimal path through the chaos. Finally, only Mira remained. "Ready, Cadet Kaine?" "As much as I'll ever be, sir." She entered the pod. The scenario loaded around her, materializing into a crowded marketplace on the colony world. Civilians moved between stalls. Her squad waited for orders. Intel chatter filled the communication channels with conflicting reports about terrorist locations. Mira didn't move immediately. She spent the first 5 minutes just observing, watching patterns, listening to chatter, analyzing data. "Command, this is Kaine, requesting permission to split the squad into 2-person teams for better market coverage. Standard protocol said maintain unit cohesion. But the marketplace was large, and visual surveillance from 5 sets of eyes would provide better intelligence than keeping everyone together. Permission granted. She deployed her teams strategically, covering sight lines and choke points. Then she did something unexpected. She started talking to civilians, not interrogating them, just talking, asking about their day, their concerns, building rapport. 10 minutes in, the first crisis hit. One of her teams reported a suspicious individual with a backpack heading toward the central fountain. Protocol said, intercept immediately. But Mira held position. Define suspicious. Subject is sweating heavily, looking around nervously, avoiding eye contact. Describe the backpack. Standard civilian model, appears full. Follow at a distance, do not engage, notify local security. It went against every instinct drilled into the students. Potential terrorist, potential bomb. Stop the threat now. But Mira was playing a different game. She understood that a colony in civil unrest couldn't afford peacekeepers creating violent incidents based on suspicious behavior. Trust was currency here, and spending it foolishly had consequences. The suspicious individual turned out to be a student running late for class, hence the nervousness and sweating. Local security confirmed his identity. No threat. Crisis 2 arrived 20 minutes later. Intel reported a terrorist cell meeting in a building on the market's edge. Definite threat this time. Verified by 3 independent sources. Mira moved her squad into position for a raid. Set up perimeter. Confirmed rules of engagement. Then she stopped. Command, requesting real-time satellite imaging of target building. Negative. Satellite coverage is allocated to other operations. Then requesting 5-minute delay before we breach. Explain. If this is a verified terrorist cell, they'll have lookouts. Our positioning will alert them. I want to see if anyone leaves the building in the next 5 minutes. If they do, we know they spotted us, and we're walking into a prepared defense. If they don't, we maintain surprise advantage. Smart. Patient. Exactly the kind of tactical thinking that saved lives. 3 minutes passed. A figure emerged from the building. Male. Armed. He scanned the marketplace, spoke into a communication device, then retreated inside. They know we're here, Mira said quietly. Command. Recommend we do not breach. They'll be waiting in a defensive position. We'll take casualties. Suggest we contain the building and negotiate or wait them out. Protocol screamed for immediate action. Terrorists must be stopped. Every moment of delay put civilians at risk. But Mira understood something crucial. Dead peacekeepers couldn't protect anyone, and a firefight in a crowded marketplace would kill civilians regardless of who won. She contained the building, evacuated nearby structures. Then she did something that made me lean forward in my observation chair. She had one of her soldiers, a Falarian, attempt telepathic contact with the individuals inside. This is not a trick, the Falarian projected. We have you surrounded, but we don't want bloodshed. Tell us what you want, what you need. Maybe we can find a solution that doesn't end with everyone dead. It took 15 minutes of mental communication. The terrorists, it turned out, weren't terrorists at all. They were political dissidents who'd been labeled terrorists by a corrupt local government. They had grievances, legitimate ones. The weapons were for self-defense, because multiple activists had been assassinated. Mira brokered a deal. Safe passage to the peacekeeping headquarters for formal asylum hearing. Neutral ground. No arrests unless charges were filed through proper channels. The scenario ended with 0 casualties, improved intelligence on local corruption, and a peaceful resolution to what should have been a bloodbath. The simulation pod opened. Mira stepped out, exhausted. The assembled students erupted in spontaneous applause. Even species that didn't typically show approval clicked mandibles or rattled scales in appreciation. I stood from my observation chair and walked down to the main floor. The room gradually quieted. Cadet Kaine, that was a textbook example of everything I've tried to teach this class. You showed patience instead of rushing in. You gathered intelligence before acting. You considered political context alongside tactical necessity. You chose the boring, difficult path of negotiation over the exciting, simple solution of violence. Most importantly, you recognize that mission success isn't about defeating enemies. It's about preserving lives and achieving objectives with minimum cost. I paused, letting the moment stretch. You pass. With honors. The relief on her face was almost comical. She'd genuinely believed she might fail, despite everything. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. You've earned advanced placement, which means harder assignments and higher expectations. The real work is just beginning. I understand, sir. The graduation ceremony took place the following week. 38 cadets received their certifications. 38 futures in the Galactic Defense Initiative began. I stood on the platform with the other instructors, watching families and friends celebrate in the audience. Mira approached me after the formal proceedings, still in her dress uniform. I wanted to say something before I ship out to my first assignment. Go ahead. You were right. About everything. I was overconfident. Too focused on being clever instead of being effective. If you'd just let me keep succeeding with my creative approaches, I would have eventually gotten someone killed. Maybe myself. Maybe someone under my command. Thank you for pushing back. For showing me the limitations. I inclined my head in acknowledgement. You were right, too. About humans being infectious. 3 of my other instructors have started incorporating unconventional problem-solving into their curricula. You've changed how we think about training, whether I like it or not. She smiled. The same smile from day one, but somehow different now. Earned instead of assumed. Does that mean you'll be nicer to the next human who comes through? Absolutely not. I'll be twice as hard on them. They'll have to live up to the standard you've set. Fair enough. She extended her hand again. It's been an honor, Instructor Kellix. I shook it. The honor was mine, Cadet Kaine. Now get out of here before I assign you extra training. She laughed and walked away, joining a group of graduates heading to the celebration. I watched her go, feeling that peculiar mixture of pride and trepidation that comes from releasing a student into the wider universe. Kix appeared at my shoulder. You're going to miss her. I'm going to sleep better, knowing I don't have to design impossible scenarios anymore. Liar. He was right, of course. Valerians always were. I'd miss the challenge, the constant need to stay 3 steps ahead, the satisfaction of watching someone grow from overconfident to genuinely competent. The next class starts in 2 weeks, Kix reminded me. 45 students, including 2 humans. I groaned. 2? Siblings, apparently. They requested assignment to your class specifically. Said they heard you were the toughest instructor in the system. Of course they did. I turned away from the celebration, heading back toward my office. I need to start designing new scenarios, twice as hard as what I gave Kaine. Because you're afraid they'll outperform her? Because I'm afraid they won't. Someone has to maintain standards around here. Kix followed me, antennae twitching with amusement. You know what I think? That I'm a glutton for punishment? I think you've finally found what you've been searching for. Your entire career. Not students who follow rules perfectly. Students who understand when to follow rules and when to write new ones. Humans just happen to be very good at that particular skill. We reached my office. I settled into my chair and pulled up the roster for the incoming class. 2 humans, brothers named Jake and Lucas Reeves. Their preliminary scores showed promise. High marks in creative problem-solving, lower marks in protocol compliance. Here we go again. Kicks, pull up every recorded human military engagement from the past 50 years. I need to understand their tactical patterns better. Planning to write a manual? Planning to survive the next semester? Outside my window, the celebration continued. Graduates laughing, families embracing, futures beginning. Somewhere in that crowd, Mira Kaine was probably telling stories about the crazy instructor who made her life difficult for 6 weeks. I hoped she told those stories for years. I hoped she passed on the lessons to whoever served under her command. And I hoped, when she faced that inevitable moment where lives hung on her decisions, she remembered that creativity was only half the equation. The other half was wisdom. And wisdom, unlike talent, had to be earned through failure and reflection, and the painful process of learning that being clever wasn't the same as being right. My datapad chimed with an incoming message. I opened it. From Cadet Mira Kaine, Advanced Combat Certification Program, to Senior Instructor Vorn Kellix. Subject: One last thing. Sir, I lied earlier. I am going to use human hacks, but now I'll use them responsibly. Thanks for teaching me the difference. Respectfully, Mira. I read it twice, then saved it in my permanent files. Then I started drafting scenarios for the Reeves brothers. They had no idea what they were in for. Neither did I, really. But that was the thing about teaching humans. You never quite knew whether you were preparing them for the universe or the universe for them. Probably both. Definitely both. I smiled despite myself and got back to work.